All right, well, welcome everyone to episode 4 of Radio Free Ortona.
Is it only 4?
This is only episode 4.
That's because most of our time was spent off mic, just stream of consciousness.
Stream of consciousness, yeah.
Best way to do things, folks.
So today we are talking about gun control. I'm Steve. I'm here with Patty and Trent.
How you doing?
Hey.
And we're going to deal with it. We're going to talk about gun control in the Canadian context. We'll have to talk about gun control in the American context because that is the 900-pound gorilla of guns.
No getting away from that.
Like we said, we're going to try and talk about the second, third order effects downstream from gun control. What happens? What does it mean for cultures, nation states, militaries, all that stuff?
Everybody.
Trent, of course, wants to talk about racism and how everything is racist. And
is racist. Blah, blah, blah.
all conservatives are Hitler, and
not
what
at all.
how the theme song to the podcast should be.
Although I did see a security vehicle on the way here, and they were called Signal 88, and I thought,
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
I kid you not.
Signal 88, boy.
Signal 88.
Anyone who knows anything about World
Yep.
War II. Oh, my goodness.
Maybe you better lay it out for.
Okay, for
well,
those
for
of
me.
you who don't know,
Yeah.
88, eighth letter of the alphabet is H. H, Heil Hitler.
Signal was the name of the propaganda magazine of the Germans in occupied Europe.
Oh, really?
Because the word signal means virtually the same thing in almost every European language. So it was signal was a vehicle of Nazi propaganda.
And HH being
Signal Heil
HH
Hitler.
being
Hal
HH.
himself.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
In the same way that 8-1 is a symbol for Hell's Angels.
okay.
HA, right?
I didn't know
So-
that.
red and white.
Yeah.
So I always find oh no, I got that wrong. Forget it. I was going to say July 20th, and then I was going to equate that to 420, but that's separate months.
What's July 20th?
The attempted assassination of Hitler.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Valkyrie?
Valkyrie, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't. You know what? I didn't know that date. Didn't have that memorized.
That one stuck in my head, too.
So, let's start this off, just a little bit of background. Let's play Jeopardy. If gun control or gun prohibition is the answer, what's the question? Like, what is, or let me be more specific, what is the problem the gun prohibition is meant to address?
Meant to address.
Is meant to address.
What is too many people dying unnecessarily of guns?
Can you be more specific? In other words, I'm going to say that problem divides into two portions.
Oh, at least.
There's the violence of organized crime, say firearms in the commission of crime.
Yes.
Then there's the mass casualty incident, where the lone shooter or a pair of shooters go into a crowded shopping mall, a school, and shoot up a bunch of people. I'm gonna start right now, throw down a gauntlet, and say to the vast, overwhelming majority of gun control advocates, they don't care about the first column. They really don't. That happens to the poor people, the peasantry, the people in the bad neighborhoods. It doesn't affect them, and they don't care.
Who doesn't care?
The vast, overwhelming majority of gun control advocates. What they care about is the mass casualty incident because they perceive that as potentially affecting them.
Oh, yeah. Plus, it's just a knee-jerk reaction to the news. You know, it's
Sure, an emotional reaction.
It's the reverse of the frisbee-catching dog that you see at the end of every news segment. You know, it's always been that way. It's meant to, yes, it could happen to me, and yes, I can empathize with that. You're absolutely right. In many ways, we can't empathize with the gun violence that's happening in other parts of the world. I have no idea what it's like to live in a ghetto in Philadelphia or
a
Chicago.
friend of mine who's from Toronto said that every year they have their big Kerry West festival, and there's always murders and shootings that accompany it. Always. because it brings out a lot of the organized crime element within that sector of the city, and they battle because they're mutually antagonistic. They're now thrown together. They're no longer on their separate turfs. There are a variety of reasons, I guess. I don't want to be analytical in this, but they come into proximity with each other, and violence ensues. Mm-hmm. And there's always 3 or 4 shootings and killings that accompany this. It's just an accepted part of it. Toronto just makes its peace with it. Again, nobody cares.
Well, I'll give you an overlap to that.
Never hear that mentioned in the gun control context because they don't care.
I'll give you an overlap to that. I mean, this happened in Edmonton. I think it was sometime last year. There was, and not to, point fingers or exclusively isolate the Caribbean community here, but there was at Duggan Community League on the south side, my old stomping grounds.
Yeah. Well, that says a lot right there.
Yeah. So there was,
Wrong side of the tracks.
The only side of the tracks. There was a grouping of, I don't know which Allen Nation it was, but and they were all together, and there was a shooting, there was a murder, and I was kind of shocked to find that out.
Was it a confrontation between two criminal groups?
I believe it may have been. I'm a bit, and so here I am. I find I'm walking a fine line between the two things you declared. Here I am. It did actually. It's criminal activity as you described it. It's impinging on something that I know, so I do care about it, but not enough to do anything but bring it up and in an anecdotal fashion without any details.
Maybe only because it happened in your neighborhood where you grew up.
Yep.
And could have, by extension, perhaps involved you.
I have a couple of addenda, corollary to the statement that you listed 2 things. You got organized crime.
I'm going to say organized by, if you're a street gang, I'm throwing you in that level.
No, I get that.
Yeah, I get that. I don't want to say just mafia. I get that. I'm talking about 4 kids.
Yeah.
4 teenagers who are part of a break and enter group.
Yeah. I get that. And it
organized crime.
I would say, you can step outside of organized crime. I'm just saying there's a couple of individuals or one individual. You got those twin brothers in Squamish 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I'm going to say that's organized crime because they had a plan and they were organized.
I think, okay.
It's a pretty crummy plan. Pretty infantile and puerile plan.
Not your typical definition of organized crime.
No,
I would just say
really broad.
I would just say crime. Broad. The other thing, because I brought up unnecessary, and this is going to cloud the issue, I know, and I'm not doing this on purpose, but it is a point that other people raise when it comes to gun control, and that's suicide. That's unnecessary, right? But then there's accidental discharge. I mean, all these things come into it.
I have some stats right here, actually.
I'm shocked.
On suicide. At the very top of the list of nations is South Korea, with a rate of 24.6 per 100,000.
Now that's just suicides in general, not suicides with
firearms. Just suicides. Roughly double of the United States, which is at 14.5.
Oh yeah.
Lithuania, Slovenia, and Japan came next. So East Asia, not doing well in the suicide department. Iceland, get a load of this, had an identical rate as Canada at 11. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, maybe these long hours of darkness, I don't know, maybe got something to it. Czechia and Switzerland, both countries with a very high availability of firearms, both had lower suicide rates than Australia, which has prohibition. So there you go.
Yeah, but now you're just talking suicide, not suicide by firearm, right? So
the difference is artificial.
Yeah.
If you're claiming that somebody is going to commit suicide because they have a firearm and will not commit suicide,
I'm not claiming anything at all. I'm just saying
that's a nonsensical proposition.
I'm just saying it's a factor that plays into the conversation.
Better back that one up, buddy.
I don't bring it up. Other people
Back
do.
it up.
I'm not saying
it up.
I'm not saying it's accurate. I'm not claiming accuracy on anything.
Well, then this is where I look at the judge and what does it I say? Move to strike from the
too late
from the record because he's just trying to plant a seed of doubt in the jury's mind but he's not actually making an argument.
Presenting facts, not evidence. You mean?
Something like that, yeah.
Well, no, what I'm saying is
Come on, where's Perry Mason when I need
someone's going to come up at you with that as
Sure.
part of this discussion.
And
I'm not even playing devil's
Well,
advocate here.
it
I'm
would-
saying it's going to come up. Any
and it
discussion
would
is going to
be-
have it.
It would be an incredibly dishonest and deceitful thing to do. For example, when you see a lot of these debates between gun control advocates or gun prohibition advocates and property rights advocates, something that I see happening over and over again, and I really wish the property rights advocates would call them on it, is they're trying to be analytical and they're trying to talk about facts and what is known and hard data. And then the gun prohibitionist will throw something out there like, oh, the children are dying. In other words, they will deliberately attempt to focus the conversation on an emotional idea. So you got this one guy over here who's saying, hey man, think analytically, think rationally, let's make decisions based on facts. And then you got another guy saying, forget the facts, react emotionally, react with your gut, make a hasty decision, make a rush decision. Don't think, emote.
So I'm going to call you on.
I put that suicide equation saying, oh, well, there's having firearms is a factor in suicides. I'm going to put that in the same category.
No, I'm going to pull out the good faith card from the last conversation
Exactly.
we had, and I'm going to put that back to you. I'm going to propose to you that calling that behavior deceitful may not be accurate, and so we have to assume, again, per your definition of good faith, is that there is not an intent to deceive
Now,
necessarily.
What possible other intent could there be?
Well, there's two ways I would put that back to you. One is when one is emotional, right? They are not therefore making a rational decision to be deceitful, right? There's nothing going on there that is saying necessarily that they're saying, I'm going to subvert this conversation.
The person who's being induced to emotion is not being deceitful. The person who's doing the inducement is deceitful. If I'm the speaker advocating for gun prohibition and I am trying to get my audience to react emotionally, it's because my argument lacks substance. My
Not
argument
necessarily.
is not convincing, so therefore I want to turn them away from an analytical, rational frame of mind and make them emotional and hasty.
And this is why I play the good faith card. You cannot assume that necessarily, right? Someone,
Oh, yeah, I can.
not if the emotion is valid. If someone is coming into you and saying emotionally, and therefore they're not saying it rationally,
Okay.
it's a very different thing if, yes, you're having a reasoned debate and someone plays
Yeah.
that emotional
Yeah.
card, right? But if someone is coming at you with that emotion because they genuinely believe that and feel that, and that is the basis of their desire to make that statement, they are not being deceitful at all. In fact, they are being
Let's
honest.
run with that. What other major decision in life should be made emotionally?
Oh, you're talking to the
What
wrong
other-
guy. You're talking to the guy who's been married 3 times. Dude.
Point to you.
Yeah, such as it is.
Such as it is.
So here's an example, right?
Let's say a policy decision. What policy decision should be made emotionally and not rationally? Healthcare?
Well,
Foreign policy?
ideally none. But the
Ideally
impetus,
none.
the
Did you say that
impetus,
again? Did you say ideally none?
policy cannot be emotional. The impetus to examine the potential of a policy, to introduce a policy, to explore a policy and its pros and cons, and whether or not to undertake that policy, that can be emotional, right? But it cannot be the sole driving force, right? The example I was going to use is, back in the 90s, there was there was a couple that were friends of my wife at the time.
I'm sorry.
It's all good. I knew.
This is a guy who's been married 3 times.
I think I
Like,
paused. I think I paused because of that. But she was very, the wife of the couple was very vehemently about bike helmet laws. She was
what?
bike helmet laws. She was all about bringing them in, right? And me, I wasn't. I was like, I grew up riding a bike, and I was stupid, and I had my bathing suit and towel in a plastic A&P bag swinging from my handlebars, got into the wheels, and I flipped over and landed on my face. And, that sucked, got up, carried on, right? And she was, her reaction was she was very angry with me. Mm-hmm. But that anger was she couldn't tolerate that in me because she had a very emotional reaction to that as a concept.
Was she a nurse?
She was. I think she was a nurse.
There it is.
I think she might have been pregnant at the time. She was coming at this from. But basically, it was.
Did you just say she was hormonal?
No. No, I did not say that. And I will deny.
I can see the police cars lining up.
No,
now.
She was thinking of children. When she did that, right? So, and I respect that about her. I understand where she was coming from.
I hear this argument all the time for big people bikes. I use the word motors. You talk to people like, oh, you ride a motorcycle? Yeah. Oh, I thought about that, but I got a friend who's a nurse, and she tells me about all the guys she sees. She works in the ER. They call you guys donor cyclists. Yeah. And like she only sees the ones that come into the ER.
Yeah.
Or
not the ones like.
What do you call that? The survivor bias. The famous example.
It's the airplane one.
Yeah. What do you call that? Is that?
I think that's survivor
bias. Is it survivor bias?
Yeah. The survivability bias. Or whatever.
Yeah, survivability bias. Yeah. So, but again, I think I've made my point about emotion does not. While we can understand how it creeps in, we should not allow it to influence policy decisions. I'm pretty confident in my statements on that. I leave the floor on this to you guys.
Well, I've already said my piece. Right. I mean, emotion is perfectly acceptable as defining a desire to explore and achieve something. But if it becomes fundamentally irrational and unreasonable,
or overly influential,
well, you're still talking about the emotion. I'm talking the rationality of it.
Sure.
Like if the thing you're trying to achieve
can inspire, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it should not decide.
What I would argue, like taking mankind to the moon, humankind to the moon. Mm-hmm. I can't say man to the moon.
People kind.
People's kind to the moon. One would argue that impetus, that the seed for that was an emotional one, right? That was a
Sure. Say the inspiration.
Yeah, inspiration. Inspiration, I would argue, is as much emotion as it is thought.
I won't
right?
contest that. It can be an inspiration for policy, but it should never, ever decide policy.
Right. So what did people do? They started building towards that. Let's figure out how we do that. How do we get to the moon? Well, we do this, we do that, we do the other thing. Actually, when you think about it, when was Kennedy's speech? That was 1961.
Yeah, I would say something around that.
They were on the moon within 8 years.
Yeah. Pretty remarkable, really.
As Kennedy said, within the decade.
Yeah. Yeah.
Listen, you can't pick on Kennedy just because he was a liberal.
I think he's picking on for his Boston accent.
Yeah, mostly just accent.
So,
Ich bin ein Berliner.
Ich bin ein Berliner. I am a tasty pastry dessert.
He's a donut.
He's a donut. Okay, so anyway, that's my.
Can I?
That's enough on suicide for me.
Yeah, Steve's got the biggest skin in the game here, so to speak. Let's Steve drive the bus. You tell us where we're going with this.
So talking about emotionality versus rationality in the gun control debate, because we talked about there's a reason we did good faith before we did gun control.
There's a very good reason.
And my reasoning for it is because I think the gun control in Canada specifically, but in a lot of places, is done in bad faith. And
I would absolutely agree.
Whether you look at, as we've had recently in Canada, the disclosure that the Prime Minister and the Minister of Public Safety were interfering in the investigation of the Nova Scotia shooting because they had a prearranged gun control agenda that they were trying to implement, and this was the perfect opportunity for them. Whether you look at the American context of whenever there is an emotional event, mass shooting like Uvalde or any of the current crop of mass shootings, they come up with the same crop of legislative proposals that most likely would have nothing to do with preventing that shooting, but it's a good opportunity to try and get it through.
I also think part of the problem of bad faith is that the gun community has zero confidence in the good faith of the gun prohibitionists. Absolutely. And this is why I don't use the term gun control. Because the people who want gun control don't want gun control. They want gun prohibition.
Yes.
Let's just be honest about it.
Yes.
And I think that is a huge problem, because if you have a candid conversation with any gun enthusiast, they would, and a candid and honest and forthright conversation, they will come up with any number of proposals that would make the public ownership of firearms safer, that they feel are good ideas in terms of legislation surrounding the sale and transfer and the use of firearms.
Okay, what mystery person is this that you're naming here?
Any gun enthusiast, if you're having a candid and honest conversation. But you can't have this conversation between a gun prohibitionist and a gun enthusiast, because the gun enthusiast assumes right from the get-go the prohibitionist is lying. Because the prohibitionist talks about gun control when the enthusiast says, you don't want gun control. You want prohibition. You're lying to me before we've even established first principles. And it's the effective shields go right up.
Yeah, of course the shields. So the shields, my counterpoint is this. Shields are up on both sides.
No,
right?
Okay.
There is a complete failure to understand that the other person has a reason for thinking the way and feeling the way that they do, right? So first of all, I'm going to push back against the concept of the gun control necessarily acting in bad faith and being the only obstacle to a conversation here.
If I can interject,
not the only obstacle.
I'd like
the initial.
I'd like to interject something. I have an audio clip.
Okay.
The Prime Minister.
What would your message be to firearms groups that are saying, this handgun ban continues to just target lawful gun owners, and it's similar criticism to other gun legislation saying it's not going to target people that are breaking the law anyways?
I think people need to be careful about misinformation and disinformation in this. We've explicitly and specifically not targeted law-abiding firearms owners, because those who currently own and operate handguns safely and store them safely are not at all targeted by this legislation. We're simply saying that we are freezing the market, and in the future it'll not be possible to buy, sell, transfer, or import handguns in Canada.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so let me start off by apologizing to you, Trent, because anytime we associate your argument with Justin Trudeau, it's the rhetorical equivalent of saying, hey, look over there, it's Elvis, and then kicking you in the nuts as soon as you turn. It is such a dirty trick. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love it. But, oh, God, yeah.
I'm not at all.
It's such a dirty trick. Oh,
actually, because Steve described this clip earlier, and I have to say, until the very end, I didn't see the problem with what he was saying, the discrepancy that you were describing. Until the very end, where he points out that moving forward, no one will be able to purchase these things and use them and stuff like that. So he's essentially, quote unquote, not impacting current responsible gun owners, because he's grandfathering them. But that in the future there will be.
Doesn't strike you as incredibly disingenuous? It's like, I'm not killing these people. I'm stabbing them, but I'm not killing them.
It's like the Tom Cruise line from Collateral. I didn't kill him. The bullets in the fall. I shot him. The bullets in the fall killed him.
Yeah.
Right. Like.
Yeah, exactly.
I would argue that, and I'm not defending the Prime Minister
I tell
at this
you,
time.
that would be a Herculean task.
What he is saying is technically he is answering the question, because he is effectively saying he's not impacting current responsible gun owners. He is impacting.
But he is absolutely impacting current responsible
he's
gun owners.
absolutely targeting current gun owners, lawful gun owners.
He absolutely is, because as a gun owner, I can add or subtract to my collection.
Yes.
I can sell stuff that I don't use anymore.
Yep.
I can buy stuff I want,
should be
stuff
allowed
that's
to
new.
buy something of a different caliber or a different style
And now I can't.
that you wish to practice with.
Okay, so now
I can't. So that's a lie.
And again, the only people who are affected by this legislation is, again, the lawful gun owner. They are the exclusive.
The future potential lawful gun owner.
I agree with you,
Right?
100%. It's the future potential lawful gun owner who is absolutely being impacted by that statement. Right, 100%.
Yeah, I mean it's an absolute assault on the citizenry.
And the reporter at the beginning of the clip asked the question in a way that I found to be appropriately framed.
Yeah.
And Trudeau's immediate response was that that's misinformation and disinformation. And and it absolutely wasn't. It was from my perspective, and as a gun owner in Canada, you have to be intimately familiar with the legislation, or you go to jail.
Yeah.
And so you have to pay attention to what they're talking about. And so as I and virtually every other gun owner that I've talked to or heard, the reporter's question reflected the view that we have and our understanding of the proposed legislation that Trudeau was talking about. And he immediately said, well, that's misinformation, when it was not.
Absolutely.
No, okay, you're absolutely right.
Not.
The misinformation, disinformation statement was, and especially doing it right off the bat.
It was on Trudeau's part confession by projection.
Well, that was bad faith. Absolutely bad faith. No question. Right. I did want to get back to something that you brought up earlier, and now I can't remember it because I'm old and my brain is gibbled.
Emotion?
No.
Suicide?
No, I did since then.
Okay. Well,
It'll come back.
I don't got it.
Or it won't.
So if you'll allow me to take this opportunity, so what do you think? Oh, was it perhaps my assertion that the real motivation
I know what it is.
is mass shooting events, not gun crime?
No, it's when you were talking about if you get a gun enthusiast and
right. The good faith. Right.
right.
That gun enthusiasts automatically feel that prohibitionists are arguing in bad faith and they're not really talking about what they want.
There's also something you said that, or having just said that my memory is shot. What I remember you saying is that any gun enthusiast is going to come out and be willing / able to have the conversation, except they can't have it with a gun control nut.
Right.
Okay, so
right. That if you had gun enthusiasts together and, like, let's say Steve and I could have this conversation because he is 100% in tune with my opinions and beliefs. Same, I know his. There's no chance of deception in there. Whereas if I just met someone at a gun show, his effective shields will be up to a certain extent because he doesn't know me. He doesn't know whether or not, maybe I'm a CBC reporter.
Yeah.
Simply undercover attempting to gain his confidence, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Again with the CBC, oh my God.
Well, they are the primary example. So
We were talking about this before you showed up. How Trent's view of the CBC and CTV in one place and the Global is kind of the national postal broadcast journalism. I'm like, pretty sure that you and I would not see any daylight between the CBC and the
no daylight there at all.
And he's
all
like,
right.
oh yeah, they're way over here.
Different conversation.
Yeah.
But here's my response, that it doesn't help. I'm sure there are plenty, south of the border, you're going to get a lot of gun enthusiasts whose reaction is going to be entirely emotional to the concept. And it's not, as you correctly point out, it's not going to be about proposing any solutions or discussing any solutions, because it's going to be a knee-jerk
in and defend every inch of territory you still hold.
It's going to be a knee jerk.
Yeah, sure.
Right to bear arms.
Yep.
My rights as an
Yep.
individual. Blah 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 blah.
Yeah. No.
Right?
No. How would you say? No concession whatsoever.
And that is equally unhelpful.
True. Yeah, it's a bad state of affairs. No doubt about it.
All right,
but
then.
I'm going to say, don't blame gun enthusiasts for creating it.
Yeah, because
They're not the ones who started lying
It happened
right
way-
from the get-go.
way back.
No, it's not.
Way
It's totally lying.
back
It's
in
totally
the
lying.
19 in the
If you
1980s.
want
Just because
prohibition,
Trudeau's lying there.
no. If you want prohibition, but you're trying to backdoor it through incremental gun control, you're lying. It's a lie of omission.
Well, this was something else that came up for me when you were talking earlier about the RCMP commissioner and the PM, right? Is it deceitful? Is it in bad faith, right, to push through gun control laws per se, right? By which I mean there are two possible explanations.
Do you
for
mean
it.
like using that event, using the event of the Nova Scotia shooting to springboard your
using it or not, right? Whether you're using it or not, it to me is not generic to the question, right? Or the answer I'm seeking right now. Right now, it's okay. If you see passing the gun control law as a good thing, that is not in bad faith, right? Because you see it as a good thing.
Really the issue.
Right? The other question is if you're doing it because politically you're going to make points, that's a bit more cynical. But if that does actually politically get you more votes, then that's also not necessarily done in bad faith, right? Because
Well, it's certainly realpolitik.
inherent to
Bismarck
that statement
said,
is
but
if it's going to get you more votes, it means more people want it, right? Steve and I were having this discussion earlier,
no,
right?
That's wow. If I had to go into a debate, say like a monk debate, and defend that position, with say $40,000 on my life savings as the stakes, I wouldn't take that.
I'm not asking you to.
Yeah, but just to give you my idea of the confidence of it, like there's opinions that I don't agree with that I can say, you know what, if I had to, I can make a good argument for that. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
or someone else can make a good argument for that. I don't.
Not Trent, though.
Yeah, I don't think a strong argument could be made for that. My understanding, and I'll get Steve to correct me if I'm wrong, is that the issue was not so much that they cynically used the tragedy of the Nova Scotia shooting to springboard their legislation, but that because the Nova Scotia shooter, at the time, the RCMP believed he had used illegally obtained firearms, and I believe that was the case.
Yeah, and that's still borne
And
out to be.
they were tracking that down to understand, okay, how did the shooter get those firearms? Like what networks, criminal networks was the shooter plugged into? That's why they didn't want to really talk publicly about the type of firearms or how they were used. But the government wanted them to compromise that investigation and specifically talk about firearms and the type used, the calibers, et cetera, so that it could add impetus to their legislation. Am I correct in that? That's the problem.
That's the problem. Yeah.
That they were compromising a criminal investigation and letting criminals off the hook in order to further their political agenda.
Okay. I misunderstood
What the
that
issue
critical
was.
part. Yeah, the issue. Because, I agree with you. That's poor faith. To me, it comes down to, and again, this is Canadian context, but to me, I'm kind of just throwing up my hands going, okay, what nefarious goal does the Liberal government have to, in pushing gun control?
I'm so glad you asked this. I am so glad.
Oh, I hope you don't take it where I think you're going to take it.
I
wanna
believe.
see where he's going with it.
I believe there are two streams: the superficial and the fundamental.
Okay.
The superficial reasoning is a desire for protection against mass casualty incidents.
Okay.
This is what is broadcast out to the rank and file, and what is intended to get the votes to say we're going to prevent mass casualty incidents.
Can I also add to that it might actually be a good thing to prevent mass casualty incidents?
Yeah, absolutely, it would. Absolutely.
Okay.
But this is advertised as the best way to do that.
Okay.
The fundamental reason is the disarmament of the population.
To what end?
I'm going to get into that before this is over, my fine friend.
Oh, no, please.
That's
no.
why I wanted to talk about third and fourth order effects. So yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I want to get into that with you.
If I can make another point, just another, I guess,
Point, stake,
or a little knock in the
notch in the
dart
in the board.
In my bad faith argument is I want to talk about so May 20th, 2020 was it?
Mm-hmm.
When the government banned by what mechanism, Canadian legislative mechanism known as Order in Council, banned a whole bunch of firearms, all basically semi-automatic. All the firearms they banned were semi-automatic rifles and some other stuff, but they didn't ban all semi-automatic rifles, just to make that clear. So the narrative that they still use, and when the Liberals brag about it, they always say, we banned over 1,500 types of firearms.
Mm-hmm.
Except they banned every model of AR-15 and every manufacturer of AR-15 they could by name. Mm-hmm. So by the time you take all of those 1,500 and take the AR-15s and just call them AR-15.
Yeah, or anything that is essentially that rifle under a different name.
Yeah, that number goes down to under 300, right? But you say, we did 1,500. No, you didn't. You did 300.
You did about 300, right?
Yeah, and some of those things were like stuff you can't get ammunition for, like, like Japanese, what they call a knee mortar, which isn't really a knee mortar.
Right, yeah.
But a grenade projector, but you can't get ammunition for that. It's just a tube.
Yeah.
Or all these other things.
It's a piece of pipe.
Sure, that's
so.
That's arguably bad faith. I would argue that yes, it's done in bad faith, except it's really poorly done in bad faith because, frankly, to the people who are meant to hear it, that message, the difference between 1,500 and 300 isn't going to make a big difference. There's 2 zeros on the end. They're going to go, hey, that's kind of cool.
He's right. I think you're right, but I also think
I agree.
Right.
It was done in bad faith, but the effect is going to be the same either way.
Yes, is it a clumsily done bad faith?
Yeah,
it's fine, but it's still bad faith.
Sure, it's again. You're talking by principle though.
Yeah,
and I think Trent's talking about effect.
Yeah,
and I think you're both right.
No, I agree.
I would concur with you that the effect is nothing, but the principle,
and the reason for that is it actually comes back to a point that is a big part of this, is that people just don't understand the enthusiasm of a gun enthusiast, right? A non-gun enthusiast does not get why, right? Mm-hmm. So why is your right to be enthused by this so important to you that children are dying over here? And there is a certain logic. It's emotional, but there's also a certain logic to it, right? And part of that lack of it's a lack of understanding because they just don't get it. Now, I will admit to everyone here that there are rifles in this room. They're not loaded. It is the first time I've picked up a rifle
since basic.
Not since basic.
Service, yeah.
Since I touched one. Probably when I flirted with getting back in 2008. So it's been at least 14 years since I picked up a rifle.
Yeah.
And I struggle to find the word to use. I don't want to say cool. I don't want to say it was like coming home. All right, and if you don't get that, you don't get it, right? And this is the lefty in the group talking.
I'd say that this goes back to again Jonathan Haidt's example of the conservative advantage. It is exceptionally difficult for progressives in general, and I only say that because if you had a Venn diagram of people who hold progressive opinions and who want gun prohibition, it's almost a complete overlap. So I think it's not just me throwing gas on the fire, partisaning this. given that political background, given that political school of thought, it is exceptionally difficult for gun prohibitionists to empathize with ideas and philosophies other than their own. They struggle with this in every policy question. So I don't think it should be surprising to us that it plays a role in this one.
Well, I agreed. But I mean, these are the times we're living in. We've talked about this before.
Yeah.
We talked about it last week, and probably the other two,
Yep.
one or
It
both of the
affects
episodes
pretty
before
much
that, right?
every single issue.
Here's the arrogance that's going to come out of me, and you guys are going to probably
Feast.
throw up your hands on this, right? To me, right now, the left isn't actually progressive. It's reactionary. It's the Jacobins that we were talking about,
Yeah,
right? This
sure.
is all counter revolution, right?
That argument is helped by the fact that one of the most popular magazines on the left currently
Is named Jacobin.
is Jacobin. Yeah.
Is it really?
I read it all. Have you ever read it?
No.
I read it all the time.
You frickin' name droppers.
No, know thy enemy. Absolutely.
We are not all your enemy.
Oh, yes, you are. You hate me. And
I don't
you want to
hate
kill me.
I don't want to kill you.
Oh, you don't personally. No, but
Well,
you're a
that's
pretty
what-
lousy leftist. You know what I mean? Mr. I watch Jordan Peterson.
I don't watch
Look,
it. I don't
pal,
just watch him. I like
Steve
it.
and I are first up against the wall. When
You're
the revolution comes, you're third. So
Absolutely, I am.
absolutely you are.
So I was laughing at myself in my head. Okay, whatever you're coming up with later, whatever. But I'll tell you this, right? If that happens, if this nightmare scenario that you're about to
This
describe,
dystopia.
this dystopia, okay, I'm gonna be knocking on your door. I'm catching a ride with you on the back of your bike over here to Steve's.
That's right.
All right, and I will be part of that counter revolution. All right, because if this
Yeah.
weird ass thing that you're like, I don't believe a word of it, but if it were to
But
come
if it were
true,
to happen.
and I'll be the first to admit, okay, Patty,
Yeah.
you were right, and let's go find Steve.
Yeah. Say, I'm outside your house right now. The door's open and the engine's running. So let's talk about first order effects. I think we set the table.
Okay.
Okay. So what do you think the first order effects? So in other words, the immediate reaction in say the first 5, 8, 10 years will be amongst gun owners. Prohibition. Let's say status quo ante. Handgun freeze. And all semi-automatics are now prohibited. Let's say that. It's just as a starting point to make it easy. What do you think will be the immediate reaction of gun owners over the next 5, 10 years? The very immediate time frame. To start it off,
Well, let's talk to a gun owner. Hey, Steve, what do you think?
I'm going to predict, just to give you food for thought, because I see you're gathering your thoughts there,
Yeah.
that they'll probably direct their leisure spending elsewhere.
Yes.
No one's going to die. No one's going to, freak out. They'll be upset and they'll be angry, but the economic activity that was devoted into the firearms industry will disappear. It will be devoted to other places. They'll simply have to find other hobbies, other enjoyments. The economic impact will likely not be noticed in the context of the overall economic recession created by the Liberal Democrats.
Hey, I've been waiting for you to finish this statement. I was going to go leading question, Your Honor, but I see no foul in what you just said, and I don't see how it's going to influence Steve, anyways. So
That's what I think will happen.
I was having a conversation much like this about who was I talking? A friend of mine, another former Army friend of mine I was visiting in BC last week, and we were talking about it. He was like, "Yeah, it's gonna, it's gonna save us a bunch of money, right? Like if I'm not blowing thousands of dollars a year on ammunition, I don't buy.
Yeah.
I am like with the progressives in the States, the prohibitionists in the States term a super owner, right? Like I've got, it's a sizable.
What defines super owner?
Over 20?
Really?
No, I think it's more than that. It might be more than 10. But anyway,
Okay.
I beat both criteria.
Like,
There's
I'm not proud of how much money I've spent.
well, exactly. And so, I would typically buy 1 to 2 new guns a year, right? I've had the current form of firearms license since 1995.
Someone try and tell me that truckers aren't paid too much.
No, this is a trucker who doesn't have wife or kids,
Fair enough.
right? Never had wife or
That's
kids,
true. Yeah.
right?
Frees up a lot of income.
It frees up a lot of income. Because, what was it? Listen, I said you guys.
I don't think you're going to save that money, though. I
No.
think you'll just dispose of it in other ways.
No. You're exactly right, right? Well,
Like you might get a quad or something like that.
or, I've been thinking about, it'd be nice to get a project car.
Yeah.
Like a project
Yeah.
hot rod. Okay, well,
Yeah.
now there's
Yeah.
money that goes that way, right? If I want to
Yeah.
put an LS in a Miata, this might be the time to do it. But
Yeah.
so
Until those are banned.
until those are banned.
Miatas?
Or just, internal combustion engines. So, Trent, what do you think?
Well, I
Immediate short-term effect for gun owners.
Well, I think that any short-term reaction is going to be based on the long-term reaction, in my view, which is any gun owner right now is going to look to the future and go, okay, I'm the last of a dying breed, right?
And
Because
what will they do?
as a society, the impact is going to be that as they die out, then ownership of those weapons then becomes illegal. Sorry, I say weapons, firearms.
Yeah, firearms, yeah.
It's the soldier in me.
Yeah,
And therefore, gun ownership declines until eventually there's none.
Right.
Right. So, I mean, I don't know if that's going to be your third or fourth order effect.
I would say that would be a second or third, yeah. Because it's a long term.
Yeah.
Long term.
But we haven't, I don't know that
Are we doing second yet?
Nope, still on first.
Okay.
I don't know we actually gave you a chance to fully answer your question.
Well, the other thing is in first order effects is non-compliance, right? Because here's the thing. In Canada, not all semi-automatic rifles are registered.
That's right.
Right? So
There's a lot of firearms
there's
out
a lot
there.
of firearms that went from non-restricted and unregistered directly to prohibited.
Yeah. That the government has no idea where they are.
Exactly. And perhaps there'll be a run on storage containment systems in the form of pipe.
Yeah. Pipe, barrels,
Yeah, and stuff like that. And shovels.
and shovels, earth moving implements.
Yeah, portable earth moving equipment.
Yeah.
And some of these things are going to go underground literally. A lot of these things are going to go underground literally.
I would agree with you.
And then there's probably going to be a black market for some of this stuff.
Yes, I would. You know what? I'm going to amend my statement to say that there probably will be a booming black market and widespread non-compliance. Now, what the second order effect of that's going to be is interesting. So, to stay on, just to move forward on first order, gun crime.
Are you really going to let him dictate where this conversation is going? I thought this was you today.
No. Trent, I got an agenda. I assure you.
I want to hear about
I came.
I
loaded
fully expected to
for
hear from the
bear.
libertarian for once on shit here.
Oh, you'll hear from me.
Oh, yeah.
Way more than normal. But
So, gun crime. What's the immediate effect going to be?
nothing.
Well, actually,
Actually, it'll go up because there'll be more offenses.
yeah, I was going to
When we
say,
talk about-
actually, the effect on current gun rates is going to be, as they stand, as the crimes are defined, is going to be negligible. And what it's going to do, it's going to create a new war on drugs by creating a new class of criminal unnecessarily. No question. And it's going to be unenforceable. The stuff that you guys are talking about, if the registration of weapons, pardon me, firearms,
Firearms. Well,
has
you know,
been.
I'm not offended by the word weapon.
Well, no, but it might
I guess. Sure.
it might cloud the conversation for me to
Okay,
use it,
fair,
right?
fair.
I do not perceive them as being used as weapons. Just it's my training is to call it that.
yeah.
Yeah, we get you. I'm on your
As a glossary addendum, right? Like a weapon. The firearm is a tool, and it can be used as a weapon.
Sure.
A knife is a tool, or it can be used as a weapon.
A
or
baseball bat
that
is a
is
tool
that can be used as a weapon.
Golf club, yeah.
Right. So, like, is a firearm a weapon if you're hunting versus if you're using it for self-defense, right?
Right. Yeah.
Or
But at any rate, that aside, you were talking about the effect on low-level gun crime.
Yeah.
like street crime.
Well, it's going to be nothing, right? You are going to create a new class of criminals that, if in the unlikely event you're able to enforce this, which it doesn't sound like to me like it's going to be enforceable, or if it does, you're going to have to throw intense resources at it, again, unnecessarily, because the problem is the unlicensed criminal element. It's not.
Yeah, they're not really going to be effective.
It's not the currently lawful gun enthusiast, gun owner.
I started looking into this and saying, okay, where can we go for a comparison? So I went to Europe. And again, I kind of agree with you that initially I think there will be little to no effect on our current levels of gun crime. Like the which is primarily pistols, low-level street crime sort of thing. I don't think there'll be any real change in the immediate short term. But I saw some data from Project Target, done by the Flemish Peace Institute in 2019, which is a division of the University of Leiden, in that they have seen, or that gun crime in Europe is usually handguns, but not exclusively. In that the use of handguns, or not handguns, the use of firearms in crime, by their data, is not dependent upon how easy it is to conceal or to transport, or there's no practical or tactical purpose to it. It's whatever firearm is the cheapest on the black market. And so they have seen an increase in the use of Kalashnikovs in street crime in Europe. That today, AKs in certain regions can be high as 10% of all gun crimes in Europe, simply because
They're everywhere.
they're easy to get. There are lots of them. They're cheap. Whereas, say, a pistol, a higher quality, say, like a Sig Sauer or something like this, well, that's harder to get. Whereas AKs, oh, good God, they're all over the place.
Is this all still legacy from the fall of the wall?
Yeah, I would say.
This is all coming out of the old Eastern Bloc.
It was beyond the scope of the Project Target research to determine why AKs are cheap. It was simply that they found that they're very cheap and inexpensive.
That's a frightening statistic.
It is. It kind of is. But again, and so this means the lethality of gun crime goes up.
Yep.
In that the lethality of a stray 7.62 Russian round is higher than the lethality of a stray 9mm round.
Well, especially the
7.62
potential.
Soviet. It's important to straighten.
This is true.
It's important.
I stand corrected. If we're
some-
going to be really precise,
I'm gonna. Well,
are we talking 7.62 by 3.9?
39?
Thank you.
7.62 Soviet.
Yes.
But because when we're talking about Russian 7.62s, they all come from a different period.
Well, that's true,
Yeah.
because the Moisen Nagant is a 7.62,
Yes.
isn't
Okay,
it?
guys, guys.
No, I'm getting into some nerdery, and you
Yeah,
can't stop me. So shut the hell up.
I know we wanted you to speak, Steve. Remember that thing I was saying about the audience that needs to
I don't
hear
care.
this?
I don't care if I put them to sleep. I don't. We're getting into some firearms nerdery, and we're gonna do it.
And you're going to like it.
You're gonna like it.
Oh, I'm going to love it.
No,
In fact,
but
I'm going to go stand over here with a rifle in my hand.
no, but.
He's doing it, folks. He's actually doing it. Okay, in the meantime, Steve, go on.
So 7.62 Russian
Yeah.
is 7.62 by 54R. The
That's
rifle,
right.
the cartridge,
Yep.
chambered by the Moisen Nagant and the PKM machine gun,
Yep.
still used by
Yep.
the Russians.
Yep.
7.62 by 25 is 7.62 Tokarev, used for the Tokarev pistol. And the Soviet submachine guns, the PPSH-41,
Yes,
the
that's right.
PPS-43,
I forgot about that.
and the Tokarev pistol. Mm-hmm. Then 7.62 Soviet
Is a
7.62 by 39.
Right. Okay, well, there you go. Okay, I
Because
stand
the Russians
corrected.
love 7.62, and
They
it was
sure do. Good.
well. The big thing was they used one barrel manufacturer for everything.
Yeah,
and
I
then
can
just
see
cut
that.
different chambers.
Economies of scale.
Economies of scale, exactly.
So I do think that the first order effect of gun crime is not going to change the rates, but there's definitely the potential to increase the lethality of it to bystanders. I don't really think it's going to happen in North America. I can't see the black market in firearms changing to make, say, higher caliber rifles more economically effective for criminals. But I'm just saying it could potentially possibly happen.
To that point, and to quote the great Clint Smith, pistols poke holes in people, rifles poke holes through people,
Right.
and shotguns with the right ammo at the right range will take a piece of meat off you and throw it on the floor.
Right. Now,
But
I also think this will have absolutely no change on the debate. Because again, the concern by the people pushing prohibition is mass murder incidents. Which segues into my next question. Unless, are we good with gun crime?
No, I think actually you're getting to a more important part of the conversation for me.
What do you think will... So, Trent, I turn to you. How do you think this will affect mass murder incidents?
It's
In the short run, 5 to 10 years.
It's likely not north of the border. We know this conversation has to head south of the border.
Well, it does
Right.
happen in Canada. I mean, again, by
It
Nova
does.
Scotia. Mind you, killed more people with fire than firearms.
yeah, that's the other thing that gets lost in the discussion about that incident is how many people he murdered.
Yes, he was a bad person
Who
who did a bunch of bad things, and some of them involved.
Okay, but again,
Flame
how do
some
you
of-
think this is really going to affect?
It's not, because mass murder, mass events are a social problem. They always will be. They always have been, right? So the only way to prevent a mass event is proactively. It is.
Like a social intervention.
It is. It's social work, right? Once it happens, you're too late, and that's where the argument about guns killing people versus people with guns killing people becomes relevant. To me, that's ultimately what we're talking about. And if they don't have access to a gun, they're probably going to go with a knife, or they're going to use a car, or they're going to grab a fire axe, right? A gun makes it, more lethal in its own ways, take out more people quicker, but that is not fundamentally the issue, right? Because now we're saying, okay, as a society, we need to be able to recognize that there are a lot of distinctions we need to be able to make in the arguments we're having, right? This person is likely to go and do something. So are we saying that it's okay that they kill someone with one person with a fire axe versus 6 with a gun, right? Because that's effectively what you're doing.
I was looking at that, and I wanted to see some Japanese examples because Japan is often held up as a example
Not this week.
of
What did
how
I miss?
gun control.
Oh, you
can
didn't
make
hear?
Oh, the prime minister.
Yeah.
The former prime minister.
Yeah,
Yeah.
former prime minister.
I stumbled across an article in the English language edition of the Nippon Times from a year ago that was talking about the disturbing rise in frequency over the last 10 to 15 years in Japan of what they call murder-suicides, which are mass murder events where the perpetrator commits suicide in the process of the event. In other words, they're taking other people with them. And the choice instrument is arson. And in similarity to the United States, these people target schools, but in a uniquely Japanese trend, they also target medical clinics where people are mobility impaired, bedridden, can't readily escape. And the other target, which was very common, but I don't see a connection, was anime studios. Anime studios tend to be, for example, no one does this to like a car rental dealer or to a like a clothing store.
I would see that kind of
But-
like an attack on a Charlie Hebdo or something like that.
I don't know. There must be some kind of cultural thing going on there. But the MO is often that the individual will go into the building and block off the exits from the inside. Find some way to rapidly eliminate those exits as points of egress and then go to the most prominent or most public exit, again, block that off by use of fire or barrier or something like this. And this is why the building is burning. And then publicly be seen to die or commit suicide or somehow wanting, say, the authorities outside or other people in the building to publicly see them. It's almost like they want their expiration to be witnessed. But again, these are mass casualty incidents where the scope of the tragedy and the scale of it is equal to any mass shooting in the United States. Like, we're talking double digits of casualties. So I would agree with you in that yeah, these mass casualty incidents are not firearm driven. The firearm is merely the mechanism of choice.
Which to me brings us to the point, north or south of the border, wherever you go, over which at which people need to be able to meet, right? That when it comes to firearms being used in mass casualty events, mass casualty crimes, there has to be a viable, productive, rational, reasonable discussion from both sides, good faith, to achieve a solution. Because that's really what's missing here, is because we know the responsible gun owners are responsible gun owners. That has not been the question. It's keeping it out of the hands of the irresponsible gun owners, right?
Yeah,
who basically fall
the
into the category of, the criminal world. So that's one segment, and it's a large segment, but that's over here because we know they don't follow the laws already. So, new laws, old laws don't matter, right? Responsible gun owners over here, they're following the law. You don't need more laws for them. It's keeping them out of the hands of the responsible gun owners, and that's where I find the Second Amendment argument. The knee-jerk response with the Second Amendment is unhelpful. Partly because, as I understand the Second Amendment, it is also inaccurate, right? The Second Amendment, as I understand it, does not guarantee the right to bear arms.
The Supreme Court of the United States would disagree with you.
Gentlemen, I suggest we park that because it will absolutely be relevant later on in this discussion. But it's not entirely germane to what we're doing right now.
Well, to me, it's part of the discussion we're at right now. We need to be able to
It's worth
have
mentioning,
that conversation.
but I think if further comment on our side,
Sure.
it can
wait.
It can age. Yeah, it can age. Go on, please.
Well, no, I think we're all at the same place. I think we all agree with the simple, the simplistic statement that
I know that Steve's, if you'll pardon the pun, putting the bullets in the gun over here. But just as a segue into what he's got for this, I did see a Politico article about, say, two researchers who profiled school shooters. And what they recommended was saying that ideally the approach that should be taken is to mobilize mental health assets and get them into the schools to try and prevent these. But they said that they felt that they knew they were just tilting against windmills because of the extreme cost. It would never, ever happen. But I kind of ran some numbers. There are approximately 3,419 high schools in Canada. So if you had a specialty counselor, one who specializes in crisis intervention in identifying, say, potential mass casualty perpetrators, and put them in each school, let's say at the top end of the salary scale, and we also have to attract qualified people and lure them away from other industries. Let's say they're making $120,000 a year each. So we're looking at about $410 million. Now, double that to account for their burden rate of their employment and the natural and bloat and inflation of expenses that comes with anything in proximity, to a teachers' union. And we're looking at about $1 billion. Yes, Trent. That was for your benefit.
blah, blah, blah.
Now, Again, $1 billion, a lot of money. The gun registry cost us at least over $2 billion. And there was so much money wasted in that program. We really don't know the true total cost. We can say that it was a minimum of $2 billion. And it accomplished absolutely nothing, notwithstanding ridiculous CBC propaganda to the contrary.
Oh my God, unions and CBC within a minute?
You betcha. So
Get them all.
You're on a roll.
just warming up. So with the gun control efforts we have employed so
Up next,
far,
the Teletubbies, folks.
we flush a huge amount of money down the drain. Billions of dollars down the drain. And accomplish absolutely nothing. So with mental health efforts, we'd still be spending a substantial amount of money, like about $1 billion. But at least I would say, we're actually trying something that might work.
I'd agree with you.
Continually to flush twice that down the tubes for something we know for a fact doesn't work. Let's spend 50% on something that actually might.
Not only doesn't work, is unnecessary. I'd say the challenge with that conceptually is that you're talking about money that's already been spent versus money that we'd spend in the future. And so, there are going to be pencil pushers out there going, well, why would we do that?
And I would just say
we could
that
just, or we could just not spend this money. And
I would say that they're falling prey to the sunken costs fallacy.
Yeah. You did touch on something that's also, to me, is very important. This is why I call this a social problem. And that's why I look south of the border and say, these guys are messed up, right? Because I bet you don't have to dig too far into Columbine. Because everyone talks about the fact that, in a lot of these cases, these are emotionally and mentally challenged children who are perpetrating these acts.
I would say damaged, not challenged.
Damaged, yeah.
Okay,
They're very sophisticated usually.
Yeah, one way or the other. Yeah, but I think the point we're making here, without splitting hairs, is something's not right.
Yeah. And that they're going to be outside their peer groups. They're not included. They don't fit in, and almost guaranteed. I'm betting. I don't know for sure, but I'm betting a substantial number of their targets, possibly their first ones, are going to be their tormentors. Will have been their tormentors, and that also is a social problem. If you're
laying money on that, I'm not laying money against you.
So, I mean, there's a problem right there too.
There's not always the case though.
No, I'm not saying it always is.
But the Columbine shooters were relatively popular.
Were they?
Well, but again, I think
they weren't complete social pariahs.
Too deep into the weeds on this, we can agree that
perhaps to the exception that proves the rule, but
there's psychological dysfunction going on here.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Well, there's going to be. Okay, let me amend that then, because I thought my understanding from Columbine was that they were bullied in cases where.
I don't know that they weren't bullied, but they were not complete social pariahs like we see a lot of mass shooters.
In the cases where it's someone who has been bullied, and I'm betting there are a lot of them, this is their only way of lashing out. They can't go out. They can't go on. Might as well do this.
I think
that the problem will have been, again, the proactive solution is we need to find a balanced approach to bullying. Right now, we're still doing the fire and forget. Simple Band-Aid to bullying as a social issue, just like we are everything else.
Yeah, we I don't think we're only now coming to really understand the role that social media plays in this hyper communication.
Only beginning, At the very, very beginning.
Yeah,
here you fit on my villain again. Yeah. It's social media.
Our ability to share and transmit information across various networks is completely new. We have no precedent in human history to guide us. We're kind of, and I know every generation says this, but I think it's legitimate this time around that social media is a genie that's been, or the internet age is a genie that's come out of the bottle, and we really don't understand it. And it's going to take us a long time to really come to terms with it.
Gen X is our generation, is the last generation to really remember what it was like before social media.
Yeah.
And everybody else has social media is there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, plus the technology that goes with it. I mean, and I can't remember if we were discussing. It was earlier today. I can't remember if it was online or offline. We were talking about the Protestant work ethic and the Protestant, the effect of Protestantism and religion on the formation of our society, right?
And
at
its institutions.
Exactly. And at the time when it was brought up, what I wanted to respond was to compare it to, I think that's more relevant to the U.S. than it is here in Canada now, because a lot less of the population is religious. Far more secularized than we were even 20, 30 years ago. And I put that slide and I overlay it on top of what you just said about social media. Not only do we have the means to do this, but now we've got all of a sudden this moral and ethical vacuum regarding our behavior, right? And then you start shining the light of puberty through that.
Oh, geez, yeah, exactly.
Look what we're going to end up.
Back to the hormones again.
Yeah. Back to hormones. Okay, Steve, give me your take. Mass murder incidents.
Not singling anyone out.
First 5 to 10.
Mass murder incidents. Well,
What effect would gun prohibition have on the first 5 to 10 years of mass murder? What effect would a gun prohibition have on mass murder incidents over the first 5 to 10 years?
I think it would have zero effect.
Why?
I don't think they're comparatively rare. Like if we're talking Canada, especially.
I'm going to say Canada and everywhere else.
Canada, they're comparatively rare, right? Like Australia, we were talking about Australia earlier before you got here. There's the Port Arthur.
Yep, I believe it was. Yeah,
Port Arthur. Don't believe it was Scotland. The Port Arthur incident, right? And Australia hasn't had a major mass casualty incident since.
Sure, but how many mass casualty incidents have they had since 1880?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Canada, we've had more than Australia, right?
Yep.
We can. In my own lifetime, the first one I really remember is the Polytechnique in 1986.
Yeah, around that neighborhood.
I think it was 89.
Somewhere around there.
Okay, but in the late 1980s, that's the first one I really remember.
Yeah.
Then it was a big gap, then that I can think of, and then there was the mosque shooting in Montreal. There was the guy who was very mad at RCMP members in New Brunswick.
Yes. Yep, I remember that.
And he was specifically targeting police officers. And he didn't. There wasn't a huge number of casualties.
No, he shot 3 or 4, I think.
Yeah, because he was going after cops. They were able to shoot back. So
yeah.
But
there were the 4 here in Alberta too.
But that was a criminal.
That was a very criminally motivated thing.
Yeah, like
the guy in
that was a known criminal who was going down shooting.
Yeah.
Oh, the guy you're talking about the guy in 2013 or 2014.
The guy in
that was New Brunswick, wasn't it?
That was Moncton, I think.
Yeah, Moncton. Yeah,
Moncton.
Yeah. So he had a hate on for the RCMP.
Yeah.
Specifically, and so he went after them, and then we had the Nova Scotia
Peak shooting. Yeah.
So in Canada, it's hard to say in Canada. I don't know that it would have, because who knows when the next one's going to be. They've been more frequent as of late. We've had in the last decade. There's been three or four, right? Yeah. So there's that. So if the government's hasn't shown any impetus to come looking for guns, but more to just use the new laws when they come up in crime. But so as all these unknown, say, semi-automatic rifles, all these unregistered semi-automatic rifles circulate, the prohibition on them is it going to have any effect on mass casualties? I don't think so.
I'm going to say that they will have an effect.
You think? I think it's going to be a reduction or an increase?
Yes, I think it's going to be a reduction.
Okay.
In that, not all of, and certainly,
I suppose when you look at the point as the people who have these things age, they will age out of the period where they'll be generally included.
I think age is a part of it.
Yeah.
In that, disturbed teenagers can't rent rental vans or heavy trucks that can mow down 70 people at a time, is what happened in Nice a few years ago.
Right, yeah.
Now, these mass murder incidents, my point behind this is that they are generally not crimes of passion. They're planned, they're meditated, or premeditated. They're thought out in advance. So some may resort to arson as a mechanism, as in Japan. And again, in Australia. Australia has had mass casualty incidents since their gun ban, but they've been arson as the mechanism, so we don't hear about them. Perhaps bladed weapons, as we see in China. And again, we don't hear about them as much because for the most part, you're only killing about 8 to 12 people as compared to, say, more than that. Teens and disturbed people in general aren't as likely to know how to make a bomb today. But if they really, really want to do this, they're not going to give up their homicidal fantasies. It's simply going to push them 5 to 10 years down the road until they accumulate the knowledge and the mechanisms to commit a mass casualty incident with other means. So I think we're going to see a pause or a reduction in the frequencies of these events in the immediate short term, but 2 problems. It's going to be illusory. The second problem is government is going to claim that their methods were successful. So we're going to be proclaiming a solution which is not a solution at all. And I think this is going to inform further policy decisions down the road from an erroneous premise. So, from there.
Should we also talk about SSRIs?
No.
No? You don't think so?
I don't want to get that far down the rabbit hole.
No? Okay.
They play a role.
They
social media. They play a role. Because
Well,
we're messing with powers
it's
that we don't fully understand yet.
It's a very correlation versus causation argument.
Yeah.
It's a correlation.
Yeah, it's an effect in the overall mental health, but I don't want to get totally distracted on that.
Yeah.
Okay, just so I know for when we do discuss it, what the hell?
SSRIs?
Yeah.
You know what that is?
Nope.
Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors.
Yeah.
Antidepressants.
It's a drug. Yeah, a family of drugs.
Psychopharmaca.
About 98, they found this in the United States, about 98% of mass shooters in the United States are on SSRIs.
And it's such a complicated thing because no doubt about it, so many people, yours truly, have been on SSRIs to a by and large positive result. But I recall very clearly driving down the road. I had a long commute at the time. It was like a 45-minute commute. And I was driving home on the way to my days off. Like I didn't have a regular Monday, Friday schedule. It was like a 10 on, 4 off sort of thing. So I've just finished my 10th work day and I'm thinking about what I'm going to do from my 4 days off. And I'd been on SSRIs for a couple of months and I was doing pretty good. I felt my opinion of them at the time was pretty positive. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I've got to mow the lawn. I'm going to have to get some groceries. I better clean out these troughs. By Saturday morning, I should paint the lawn furniture or paint the picnic table. Then I'll kill myself, and then I got to clean it. Whoa! Like, it shocked me how smoothly that thought had just went into my head. I'm going through this to-do list of things that I have to do, and I got to kill myself. Terrified me. But I thought, okay, didn't know where it came from, didn't understand it, preferred not to think about it. About a week later, same thing. I'm thinking about, well, things I've got to have to do on my next batch of days off. And I was thinking of some task that I had to do that I really wasn't looking forward to. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to go about it. It was going to be really difficult, and I was really wishing I could get away with it. And a thought popped into my head that I'm going to kill myself on my next days off anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Whoa.
Yeah, it terrified me. As soon as I realized what thought had come to my head, it was like a jolt of electricity through me. I almost put it into the ditch. I immediately cold turkeyed the SSRIs. Immediately walked away. And then at this point, I was doing really well. Like I'd had a nervous breakdown, and this is why I was on SSRIs. And at this point, instead of having, say, bi-weekly or weekly interviews, I was having interviews at the 6-week interval. So, and I remember them asking me all the time early on, with the prescription. So, are you having any thoughts of self-harm or suicidal ideation? And I'm no, like, what are you talking about? I'm doing great. I'm feeling happy. Things are looking up, I thought they were ridiculous. And then I thought, now I know why. And so when I spoke to the psychologist and the psychiatrist, I had both on the team. And they said, so what's going on? I said, I have stopped taking them damn drugs. And I told them why. And they said, okay, when? And I said, about 4 weeks ago. And I said, well, that's not really the way you should do it. Like, we should be weaning you off that dose. Just cold turkey, it could have nasty effects. I said, like, what, dying? Like killing myself? You go to hell. I'm never taking them things again. But it's a complicated thing, because did they help me initially? Absolutely, 100%. 100% they helped me initially. But
Boy, when they talk about side effects, huh?
Yeah, well,
yeah.
And like he says, like the vast majority of people who take SSRIs don't commit mass shootings. But,
yeah, the vast majority.
But the vast majority of mass shooters are on SSRIs.
Yeah.
So it's a very complicated.
So yeah, it's a factor. It's a factor, no doubt about it. And again, to my point, that we're probably going to see an immediate short-term reduction in these events. But the problem isn't going away, because these guys are still going to be on SSRIs.
Yeah.
It's just going to take them a little bit longer to accumulate the tools.
Do you
of
think
mayhem.
do you think that maybe as these people who are likely to commit mass casualty events, do you think that if their time frame is delayed because they can't access guns, do you think there's a chance that maybe a few of them will be therapied out of it, or
No.
Well, yeah, who's to say, right? I mean, it's
I mean, an individual's
No,
individual.
I'm going to say no, because the guys who do commit the mass therapy, or not the mass therapy, a mass therapy event, the people who do commit the mass casualty events, I think they are the very small, incorrigible, so ill,
Yeah.
and so psychologically impaired that I don't think we have the tools to save those people. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, think about, like, when you think about the enormity of such an act, that guy is so far gone.
well, I think, and there you've hit on another point. I think is very important to us as a society. We don't know what to do with that. We don't know what to do with the unavoidable negatives. It's like a pandemic. Mm. It's like a tornado rolling through town, right? It's like an act of God. Once in a while, really horrific things are going to happen. And we rightly find them horrific. And, we want to do everything we can to prevent these things from happening in the future. And we wish this hadn't happened at all. But in a lot of ways, we're just processing our horror and grief at the event. And that's why I think the Polytechnique, and you brought it up as the first one, because it probably was, in a lot of ways, the first.
Certainly in the modern context.
Yeah.
But it may not have been literally.
Yeah.
But I'm struggling to think of one before that. Maybe I can't remember where Denis Lortie fit into that, but it might have been before. But that wasn't anywhere near as big a thing.
No,
right?
The Quebec.
And I don't think
the
he
VNA.
killed more than one or two people.
Yeah, he didn't kill very many people, but that was 1971, I want to say.
No,
80s, early 80s.
It was 80s or 90s.
So the Quebec National, that was in the 70s, I'm sure.
No.
He was mad at the
Lortie?
Yeah, he was a Vendu. Went crazy, took a 9mm SMIG, and
Yeah, he was a Van Dude, but like all the Quebec Reserve regiments are.
I thought he was Reg Force, wasn't he?
No, I don't think so. I'm pretty sure.
Are you going to look him up?
Yeah, what was the
I'll
name?
find out. Yeah,
Denis?
Denis Lortie.
I think it's with one A.
Lortis.
Oh, TIE, I think. Oh, there he is.
Could be.
Oh, 1984.
84, okay.
So anyway.
And I think the Polytechnique really opened up our eyes. First of all, it was a horrific thing.
It was
Right?
shocking.
And the fact that it was against women, it was the misogyny
Yeah. Yes.
really
that made it
really
worse.
struck home,
Yeah.
and it became a cathartic moment for us as a society to kind of go, holy crap, look at what we are capable of as a society ultimately, right? So, it became about more than just this individual doing this horrific thing. It was like everything that was behind it. So,
You're right. He was right first.
Ah, there you go.
but it's, we just need to be able to process that. And in a lot of ways, we're incapable of that now. I've said it before. We are a society that doesn't even know what inconvenience is anymore, let alone what hardship is.
Right.
So being able to just deal with the fact that sometimes shitty stuff happens. And
Yeah. Except
how do
when
we
they're
get past
human,
that?
When they're human created, we feel that we should be able to control that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the mass casualty event, the deliberate mass casualty event it's such a expression of evil, right? Like of individual expression of evil, right? And we were talking before, like how we were comparing the effects of 9/11 to the effects of the Uvalde shooting and how there were the similarities, but it was like 9/11 was such an expression of evil by those 20 guys or whatever that it took all of NATO to war for 20 years.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so the Uvalde shooting, the Buffalo shooting, the copycat shootings that have happened since are just such a concentrated expression of individual evil that it's why it's driving the conversation, not because the numbers are bad, right?
Yeah.
Like, because the casualties, I was thinking about it because we were talking about casualty numbers. The casualties on 9/11 were 1/6, or not 1/6. Well, yeah, about 1/6 of the total number of casualties from firearms in the United States every year. Right? It was 5,000, 5,500, right? And on average, firearms deaths in the United States of all causes, suicide, officer-involved shootings, and others are about 30 to 33,000 or something like that. So,
Well, and again, that to me raises this as a social problem, right? Just being able to look as a society,
Yeah, but
right?
again,
If I'm an
context.
American, if hypothetically I'm an American, I would like to imagine myself looking at this going, okay, what kind of society am I living in that it's okay that 33,000 people are dying by firearms every year? But as a society, I'm going to go to war for 20 years and inflict horror on more civilians than died in 9/11. Probably more casualties in the U.S. Army than occurred in 9/11.
Okay, but there are more people, slightly more. It's a little more. It's something like 1.2 to 1. People who die in backyard swimming pools in the United States in firearms. What makes this worse is that the victims of backyard swimming pools, drowning incidents, are almost always toddlers.
Always.
It's incredibly tragic. I don't see anyone banning backyard swimming pools.
No, but I mean, there's...
And again, why not? Why not? If the idea is saying that, look, man, how can the United States as a society tolerate such a horrible toll? Okay, right. How can they tolerate such a horrible toll from backyard swimming pools?
Well,
Are these like, this is like the whole public safety argument of it?
I guarantee you.
Why is there not an equal outcry in Canada? The number of people who die in drunk driving incidents is something like what? I don't know the exact number but it is exponentially greater than firearm deaths.
Oh, yeah, in Canada, yes.
Yeah. So why are we not devoting, like, even a fraction of the social horsepower that we put towards gun control to the infinitely greater problem of drunk driving.
But we already have, actually. So
have we?
what you've done, actually, you've just reinforced the lack of a need in Canada by what you just said for gun control. Just because that's how infinitesimally small the deaths by firearms are in this country. Again, no stats on me, but I'm willing to bet drunk driving is down significantly from when we were youth back in the 80s and 90s. And that will have been a social change. That will not have been a legal change.
I don't know. I think I think there's two things going on in that, people are consuming less alcohol in general as a social change. But I think there are more people on the road. So that's kind of counterbalancing it. But again, I don't have any.
I'm thinking per capita, but what I'm thinking is drunk driving incidents is down
I don't know.
per capita because I think there is a greater social stigma now in Canada towards drunk driving, and it's a generational one. It's a social thing. It has not been a legal thing. That's why I think we have put our social effort. Mothers Against Drunk Driving has had a huge impact on our society.
Okay, but this is something that I often use in the context of gun control. The number one vehicle, according to insurance information, and these are American figures, but I can find no reason why they would not also apply in Canada. The number one vehicle involved in fatal car accidents or in fatal drunk driving accidents is a pickup truck. The number one pickup truck, and it's by a pretty it's statistically significant margin, is a Dodge Ram. So why are we not prohibiting Dodge Rams? There is clearly some kind of link between drunk driving and Dodge Rams. And the Dodge Ram kills infinitesimally more people than any of these firearms here on the floor in this room.
Yeah, but
so why are we not banning Dodge Rams?
You're preaching to the choir here. I mean, we've all...
the hell good is that, Trent? You're supposed to be arguing with me.
We've all essentially agreed that this is a social problem.
Where did you find this guy?
Don't worry,
I found you.
Touche.
I come up with enough stuff to piss you off. I mean, it's to push back against. I just surprise you half the time, right? Because by actually agreeing with you.
Damn it.
We know that we've all agreed that this is a social problem, right? Taking away the guns from the law-abiding citizens isn't going to change anything. Taking away the trucks, like Dodge, taking away. You don't want to. Using your example, you don't want to take away Dodge Rams pickup trucks, right? What you want to do, because we're not talking about getting rid of M16s, right? We're talking about getting rid of all guns of a certain class, right? So you're talking about all pickup trucks or all or all motor vehicles. Really, when it comes down to it.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, what you're talking about is taking those vehicles away from people who are going to drive them drunk. Now, you can't do that.
Or taking away from everybody because we also want to.
Yes.
Or because we can't accurately predict in advance who is going to drive drunk.
Right. But this is where we rewind the conversation to where we already agree, where it's you have to be able to keep the weapon of choice, be it a Dodge Ram pickup truck or a vehicle of any sort, or a rifle or a knife or a brick or out of the hands of whoever is going to use that wrongly
for harm,
right? So that's what, to me, that's what all cycles back to, right?
I want to point out that maybe it's not relevant to this portion of the conversation, but I'm going to inject it in a little more legislative nerdery. The reason I have the firearms in the room is, to use Patty's metaphor, we are in a legal situation where the Dodge Ram is non-restricted. The Ford F-150 can only be used on a racetrack. And the Chevy Silverado, you just can't have. That's where we are legislatively in this country as far. So we've got, Trent has mentioned the rifles that we have in the room. I've got 3 different rifles in here. All 3 rifles are chambered in 5.56 NATO. All are semi-automatic. All fire from the same magazine. The magazine interchanges between all 3 rifles, and all 3 are different legal classifications. And
just maybe define what those classifications are for the audience.
okay, so in Canada, for long guns, we have 3 classifications: non-restricted, which is essentially an unregulated firearm. You can go to the gun store. The regulations recently changed on this, but up until recently, you could go to the gun store, and if you were a licensed firearm owner, you could pick a non-restricted rifle or shotgun and show your firearms license, buy the thing, and walk out with it. Restricted rifle required a registration and transfer with the government. And prohibited didn't mean you couldn't have it. It just means you had to have it before they said it was prohibited.
Right.
So,
and then once it is an unrestricted, you could go out to the farm and, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, but say it could be used for varmint control.
no, prohibits could not.
No, unrestricted. Unrestricted.
Oh, unrestricted. Yeah.
Or
Sorry,
you're
talking about these. Sorry.
Yeah, or you could fire it into the hillside.
Yeah, you can shoot them on crown land, or
right.
You can.
Restricted. You may not do any of these things. You may only fire it at a licensed templated range.
Yes.
With an authority to transport.
Yes.
Obtained from the chief firearms officer before you move the firearm.
That is correct.
And a prohibited, you can't do anything.
It sits in your safe.
Yeah, sits in your gun safe. You are a criminal if you take that outside your own residence.
Right. But the thing is so unsafe you can't use it, but it's not so unsafe that you can't
have it. Yeah. And yeah, obviously, and here they are. There's very, very little practical difference in the application of any of them, yet 3 very, very different classifications.
Certainly from the target's perspective, there's
certainly from exactly when we talk of ballistic terminal ballistics. So on second order effects, guys.
Are we only on second order effects?
We are only on second order effects.
All right, so this is what I'm going to propose. I'm going to propose a quick pause.
Okay.
Because Trent needs a cigarette.
Sure.
Fair enough.
All right. We'll be back in a bit.
Okay, so talking about second order effects, in other words, 10 to 20 years down the road in a society where you have a gun prohibition. So I'm going to ask you this question. If gun crime remains the same, with a possible switch to long guns, with a possible increased lethality in street crime, if there is an increased use of long guns by criminals simply because they're economically available, which might happen in the next 10 to 20 years.
And they're illegal.
And of course, yeah, because a gun's a gun, man. Like if you're a criminal and you need a way to enforce the aims of your street gang, any kind of gun's going to work, right? Whether it's a pistol, whether it's a submachine gun, whether it's a rifle, you don't care. Will this cause police to arm up in response? And could this potentially cause an increase in the militarization of police? Your thoughts?
They're already arming up, right?
Would this exacerbate that trend, possibly?
If there's an increase, sure.
I can't see them getting much more militarized than they already are.
You can't see this getting worse. Like we're that bad.
Like unless if the criminals start building up armored technicals or something like that, and then the cops have to get 50s or start packing M72s in patrol cars or something like that. Like
I don't know, Mexican police scenarios.
I mean, we've gone from the point in our lifetimes. We've gone from revolvers and shotguns to now they're all carrying high-end Glocks and and
Carbines in the trunks of their cars.
well,
Yeah.
I think
If not
sometimes
openly
carbines up
carrying.
front, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, sometimes it's
carbines.
Where the
Back,
shotgun used to
Yeah.
be,
Yeah.
right? I would argue, if anything, if it's a response to the crime, and now I think I see where you're going with your fourth order, right? It's going to be paramilitarization, right? So I guess the one thing that's missing in this for me that we haven't discussed is one effect is the capacity for self-defense against criminals has been negated
Yes.
one generation down the road.
Yep. And
So now it's even more an onus on the police to enforce.
And in this regard, like that brings me, say, to like the idea of gun owners, but to your point, expand it to the general public. I think we're going to see an increased cynicism in that if this was supposed to make us safer and it didn't, what's the point of having our justice system? What's the point of having these laws? What's the point of laws and law enforcement when we say, okay, this will solve all our violence problems, and it doesn't?
Well, we know. We already agree, and I think we reasonably agree.
We three reasonably agree. But I think there is a very, very, very large segment of the population which is in support of gun control. Like members of my immediate family who I discussed this or tried to discuss this with, they try and avoid discussion. I think there's going to be an increased cynicism and a decreased likelihood across the board to obey a lot of laws and ordinances, in that we see that a lot of these things are political in their orientation. They're not really intended to make us safer. They're not really intended to help me as a citizen. A lot of disregard for our institutions and the justice system in particular.
I don't think we need to even discuss a cynical perception. I think the reality is going to be under this scenario that if people are unable to defend themselves, the average citizen,
Yeah.
if the police are having to deal with a heavily armed criminal population, then there's going to be even less capacity to enforce all other laws. Right? We're already seeing, you want to talk about cynicism. I mean, we've had members of the police come through the regiment, and I've had some interesting discussions with them about the FIDO concept.
FIDO concept?
Fuck it, drive on.
Oh.
Right? There is a lot of stuff out there, that already isn't being enforced. Right? And so you end up with this, as you've been discussing this, in my mind, I'm just envisioning, okay, so the federal government is taking this tack and they're going through all this gun control and they're putting all sorts of resources into it. Now, under the scenario we're discussing and describing, now it's down to the jurisdictions that are responsible for policing to assume costs for what is at best an unreduced criminal element with firearms.
Yeah, at best,
At best.
unreduced.
And it might be worse. At a time, so it's, what do we hire more police, train them better, arm them better, and in the meantime, we're already seeing crimes that aren't being enforced, or
Crimes that aren't being targeted, or laws that aren't being
laws
enforced.
that aren't being enforced, crimes that aren't being
Prosecuted,
solved,
yeah.
prosecuted,
Yeah.
and that's just going to get worse as well.
The late, great Jack Binns once said to me, we have the gun control we have because we have the crime we have. The fact that we have generally low crime in Canada means we can have strict gun control and there's not a great big hue and cry. If, however, we had the crime of Brazil from, say, 10 years ago, if the sons and daughters of bank CEOs
Right.
in Toronto faced abduction,
Yeah.
we would have much different gun
would
control
have very different gun
because
control.
they would have armed private security because they had the money to lobby the government to say we need armed private security because your jackasses can't protect us.
Yeah, but that's still a form of gun control.
Sure,
Right? Armed private
But-
security is just something that the rich can afford.
But then,
Yeah,
but to
but
create
it's
the legal
not-
mechanism
Yeah,
for that
yeah.
would end up liberalizing gun laws
Yeah.
in some ways for everyone else.
Yeah.
I don't see that happening at all.
Well,
No,
if the level of crime gets worse. We already talked about like a proliferation of crime. Who's to say that like the collapse of public safety that we are seeing in Mexico? Who's to say that couldn't spread into the southern United States? Who's to say that could not follow anywhere that the drug networks, and I'm not talking about marijuana, I'm talking about hard drugs. Who's to say that stuff that we can't just say, well, we'll address it by legalization. Like, we can't realistically legalize fentanyl. We can't legalize crystal meth. We can't legalize heroin. Like the consequences of that just be too great. But the profit potential for criminals means that they will always be involved in these networks and they will be willing to kill to protect their share of their networks. So yeah, who's to say that, we wouldn't see an increase in lethality of crime? And then, a subsequent reaction by the public because of that. So
Again, social problems.
social problems.
I know. I hesitate to bring up, Portugal at this point, but I mean, their drug policies in decriminalizing every form of drug have, on aggregate, been considered a positive experiment.
But
and a positive
hasn't
policy.
really, at least according to Project Target, has not appreciably impacted their gun crime.
It has probably impacted their drug crime.
And Portugal's decriminalization of drugs is a very misunderstood thing by a lot of people. Yeah, the possession and the use is decriminalized, but if they find you pass out in the street stoned, you're going to jail, and then you're going into a treatment program.
Right.
They haven't criminalized addiction, but they've, if your addiction becomes a problem,
Then the society intervenes.
You're getting an intervention. You're going into a custodial rehab program, or you're going
But
to
my
jail.
understanding is that those rehab programs are actually quite successful, and the
sure they are.
recidivism rate is way down.
I'm not saying it's not a system to model. I'm just saying that it's kind of
I do see a logic behind it, right? Like, if you have a demand, there's always going to be a supply.
Yeah.
And like the North American approach has always been attack the supply, which to me is foolish.
It's always been foolish.
Yeah,
but
attack
because
the demand.
the demand is
gonna
too
drive
big to
the supply.
contemplate.
Yeah.
Well, no, the demand.
Attack the demand.
The demand in so many ways is, in some ways, anyways, driven by the illegality of it.
I
mean,
guess.
it's
But again, I'm not super familiar with the Portuguese situation because again, I find it really hard to get unbiased information. Like, I'll look at one media story where clearly they're pushing an agenda of legalization, or I'll look at another media story where they're pushing an agenda of criminalization. And I'm not fully confident I'm getting good information.
Yeah.
But like, say what you're saying, if the situation was one where they said, okay, you know what, if you have this addiction, but you're not really hurting anyone and you're able to function as a citizen, okay, fine, whatever. But as soon as your addiction now becomes an issue for the people around you, okay, now we're intervening. And you, as you said, you're going to end up in a custodial
Rehab
treatment program.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty good, pretty
better
common
than-
sense model.
better than throwing people in
it's,
jail.
It's similar to the Danish model.
Yeah.
Schellenberger has probably written most
Yeah.
in his latest book,
Prolifically about that?
San Francisco, his last book.
Sicko?
San Francisco.
Or San Francisco, that's it, yeah.
He's written, I think, most in detail about both
Right.
both like the Netherlands model and the Portuguese model, which are not too dissimilar.
Yeah. So, back to second order effects of gun control. Mass murder incidents. What are we looking at 10 to 20 years down the road? Because they're not going away.
No.
Yeah, I
We
don't
know
think it's-
that.
I don't think it's changed. I mean, it's the proportion of your population that is undertaking these crimes is
Does
probably going to remain relatively the same.
does it depend on how well we start to grapple with as a culture with how to deal with the effects of social media?
I think it
And
does.
stuff like that.
Because, well, maybe not social media, but let me say, I do think it's relevant as to how we deal with mental illness.
Yeah.
Maybe we get better at it and this problem goes away. I don't know.
Yeah. An interesting one about mental illness. I was listening to, I think, Jocko Willink and Daryl Cooper. They were talking in one of Jocko's podcasts about in response to the Uvalde shooting. And Daryl Cooper had a shocking statistic from in the 1950s. I think he's used like about 1955. There were 300 mental health beds per 100,000 residents in the United States. Currently, there's about 17.
Yeah. And I think
I'm willing to bet that number is probably pretty similar up here.
and there's a part of the reason for that is that the mental health system was very much abused.
It was a very
Yeah,
abusive
in the United
yeah.
States. Yeah, because it was custodial.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of stories of how it was used as a proxy for imprisonment.
Yeah.
When you didn't have enough evidence to get a conviction, or it was a way that families could, not families, but powerful individuals could extra legally eliminate people that they didn't like.
Yeah.
Not just that. I mean,
There's a reason why that happened. It wasn't just neglect. It wasn't just indifference.
We're in. I think we're getting to an apogee on the
Yes.
pendulum swing of this.
Exactly.
Right? Like the abuse was one
Exactly.
apogee. We're at the opposite apogee.
Yes.
Now it's time to try and get
Absolutely.
back to maybe we need a little.
Yeah,
more,
maybe we should go back the other way.
Right.
Yeah.
You know.
yeah, I mean, they're guaranteed there are a number of diagnoses from back then
Yeah.
that are either better understood now
Oh, absolutely.
and are not even considered. We can deal with them outside of that system.
But you
yeah.
talk to cops now and you ask them about the percentage of people that they have to deal with
That are mentally ill.
that are seriously mentally ill and unable to function in
Yeah.
society and who need to be cared for.
It's profound.
So,
Yeah, I mean, and we've discussed, how to approach these things in so many ways.
Yeah.
Actually, this comes back to a point that you made earlier, and I've actually had trouble making this distinction before. The concept of evil, right? So, flying the planes into the Twin Towers, I consider that evil. In as much as I can understand the term.
I don't think you get an argument.
When it comes to the young men who enacted their crimes on Columbine, when you talk about some of the more disturbed or damaged, as you put it, people who have undertaken some of these mass casualty events, that to me is disturbed. That's emotionally or mentally.
You're saying that's illness.
That's a
not
psychiatric
morality.
issue. So I don't know where the distinction lies sometimes.
It is. I think a lot of these guys, because a lot of them are trying to like the Japanese people are doing, are trying to commit suicide but they want to go out with a bang, if you'll forgive the
They
expression.
want to take a lot of people with.
So in that way, their deaths are very much a death of the despair, the same way as suicide is.
Yeah.
Right. And so you're trying to. How do we prevent those? Right. Like.
Yeah.
Well, something like you mentioned, Steve, just in a separate discussion a while ago, we were saying that, okay, you know what? So we lose all our firearms and they, bring in all these prohibitions and the mass murder incidents don't stop. The crime doesn't stop. Can we get our guns back?
Yeah.
Well, the answer to that is no.
Of course.
You're not going to get them back.
Because the crime isn't.
The crime isn't the point.
Crime isn't the point.
It's not the fundamental point. It's the superficial point, not the fundamental.
This is where I disagree with you guys.
Well,
I think it is.
You know what?
I think it is the
you're
point.
here
You
to
will have
disagree with us, so-
absolute room to, like, when we delve into that deeper. But as just staying on the second order here, at this level, what do we do when we have entered into this new social contract And we've denied people that right to self-defense and in the return of greater safety, of safety from mass murder incidents. That was the whole point. We want safety from mass murder incidents, and we don't get it. Well then what happens? Will governments continue to blame the mechanisms over the actors? Are they going to be under pressure to do something, fear quotes, do something? Are they going to blame white supremacism now? Like, where's the low-hanging fruit that they will inevitably go to? Because we've misdiagnosed the problem in the first place, so governments of any stripe are loath to admit they were wrong.
Of course they are. Again,
So
in times such as these, of course they're going to be, because the opposition's just
what
going
happens
to
with
climb
that?
all over them, right?
Like,
We need government, we need politics, we need politicians to, in good faith,
Mm-hmm.
work for the betterment of our society, not simply the
cynical,
the careerism
short-term political gain.
of being in power.
Like,
Power is not
case
the
in
point.
point, our current federal government.
What you do when you're in power is the point,
Right.
right? So, and I'm just
But I'm like, this is where I don't have any speculation. I'm turning to you guys. I can see this as being a real issue, a real problem. That we've taken away two fundamental rights from society. Property rights and the right to self-defense. To me, the bigger one being the right of self-defense. In return for what we thought was going to be safety from mass casualty incidents, we don't get it. Now we got a huge problem. We have torn a massive hole in our human rights, and we have gotten nothing in response
then what
or in return.
What is needed is a political leader who can step forward, present in a rational fashion these points, like be able to present this back to the Canadian population in such a way that they will go, you know what, he's right. You know?
Difficult to do, and there is such again, it is a partisan issue. In that a lot of people are going to say, well, maybe what this politician is saying might make sense on a certain level, but I have been conditioned to distrust people of that political party or that political stripe. Therefore, I'm not going to even attempt to engage with the argument. I have been conditioned and trained to react emotionally to this topic, and this politician who is trying to articulate a logical, rational position, that's not something that I can do because again, years of conditioning.
That is the challenge.
This is a huge. I don't think.
This is
I don't
the challenge,
think
and we
that
know who
what
you're talking about.
Proposing is possible.
You're talking because we're assuming here
Mm-hmm.
that this has to be a Tory, right? That's your assumption,
I can't
right?
see it. Honestly, dude, I cannot see a Liberal Democrat or Green politician advocating the position you're talking about. I just can't see
I
it.
think our best case, which would help depolarize
Mm-hmm.
things, would be to have a Liberal leader who is able to do this, to step in with a certain amount of common sense,
Mm-hmm.
look at this, and in the way that we've dissected it and come out of it the other end with what we've come up with, right?
Jeez, dude.
We
I
have
think
to
now-
reset the entire Liberal Party.
yeah, I think
Possibly.
we got a
Absolutely
better
possibly.
chance of pole vaulting
So
to the Duke, man.
now, if you talk about the Tories, now I was going to say, you know what? I'm not conditioned to vote against them. I tend to vote against them more than I do vote for them, but that is not a knee-jerk,
Sure.
unconsidered
By
concept,
and
right?
large, that is our politics, though. By and large.
Right now, that's what it's come to. So you're absolutely right when you say that maybe people have been conditioned against them. They've got emotional reactions, right? That is the challenge of any conservative leader in Canada who wants to gain power right now,
Yeah.
right? That's what they need to be able to do. They need to be able to bring the party back to the center and the center back to them. And they can't do it right now.
I can't see. No, I would disagree with you entirely about bringing the party to the center. But again, I don't want to get too crazy into that. You got a.
It's not really relevant to this conversation, but it's kind of relevant to. I think it's just an advertisement that the Conservative leadership candidate Pierre Poilievre is running, and I think if he stays on this message, I think he's got a good chance.
Okay, well then maybe it's germane.
It has nothing to do with gun control. It's basically
About messaging, like what he was talking about, like broadening outreach and
going to issues that people care about.
Okay,
I don't think it's not really relative to gun.
Okay, are you going to play it or
no?
Okay.
I did that. I hit that.
Scrap that.
Mistake,
Okay.
But I'd like to show it later after we're done.
What do you think of the second order effect in regards to mass murder incidents? Like if we go into this bargain where we abrogate our property rights, one of our property rights, we abrogate our right to self-defense, and there's other rights that we're abrogating, but again, I want to talk about that on the next episode. But say those two, we make that deal just on this level with the belief that it's going to free us from mass murder incidents, and then we find out in 10, 12, 15, 17 years, it did not. What's the long-term effect? What's the societal effect?
It's a trail of tears. It's I don't. If like Ben said, we have the gun control because we have the crime we have. So if the crime gets worse, because I mean I'm a libertarian. I have zero faith in the government's ability to protect us. Right. That's foundational to my being, right?
But also as a libertarian, you also know that no government voluntarily relinquishes power.
No, exactly. So
by
second
crime
order
increasing, it's not going to get our rights back.
No, it's not. So those underground guns will come back above ground. And what do we see? Do people just use them?
Vigilantism, perhaps?
Or does it become something even bigger?
I don't necessarily agree with that this is irreversible. I think under what you're proposing, if things get so bad everyone's looking at the government and saying,
look at Brazil.
Brazil liberalized firearms laws.
They had a rollback of very restrictive firearms laws. Yeah, just very recently.
And some of their politicians are claiming that it's been actually very successful in reducing their violent crime. Yeah. So at any rate, so far as I know, whether it has or has not, they're quite popular. Yes.
So that any Brazilian politician who would run on a platform of further restricting or rolling back these new firearms freedoms would probably have an uphill battle.
Yeah.
Well, that has the added element of seesawing, right? You just had the control, you just release the control, you can't go back to the control again, unless there's a groundswell of movement for it, right? No, I can see that if things get so bad, as we've described it, and it's an obvious failure, and again, if there's a groundswell of pushback and people go, okay, we're not safe.
I guess
right? Your liberal policies have not kept us safe. You said you were going to make this happen. It was going to make us safer. This is still happening. But not only are the mass casualty events happening, but crime across the board is up. That's when, it gets to a point where it doesn't matter who the leader of the opposition is, who the Tory leader is. They get voted in and they can start rolling stuff back because that's what people want.
My concern is that if government attempted to solve this problem by overreach, they'll double down on overreach.
Oh, yeah.
That's my concern.
Depends on the government.
I don't know that so much it does.
Government
is such a low-resolution instrument.
Yeah.
It's kind of...
If you get the Conservatives in on that mandate, right, they're not going to double down on it.
Except that Conservatives tend to be, for no pun intended, very conservative when they get into office. It's like Mark Stein said that at least when progressives get into office, they do things. They enact policy. They make things happen. Whereas when conservative governments come to power, and this is across the Western world, it's kind of like they're just keeping the seat warm for
Under the scenario we're talking
progressives
about,
again.
the only way they're getting back in, the way they're getting back in under what we've described, is things are so bad, people want law and order.
Or they want
a
public
law and order
safety. Yeah, they want public
minister
safety.
in, and they're going to be pushing it probably, and they've already got the backers who have had to bury their firearms, right? And they're going to have more of the people coming to them for that, right?
Possibly. I hope so. I really hope so.
It may
But
just
boy,
be a failure of my
I'm
imagination
cynical.
where I imagine a political discourse relating to firearms in this country talking about self-defense, because the firearms community gave up self-defense as a justification so long ago.
I guess.
Like back in...
I think that was a tactical move, though, not a philosophical one.
If crime gets bad
Oh,
enough,
no, I understand. I understand it was a tactical move, but literally, like, it became... So, like, when C-17 was implemented, and then later C-68, like, if you went to... when you buy a restricted firearm in this country, you have to give a reason
Yeah.
to
Justify why you have it.
why you want it. That reason could be, basically that reason is target shooting or collecting, right?
Yeah.
Or competition shooting. And if you said self-defense, you weren't getting the gun.
Yeah.
You're not getting the gun.
Yeah, you wouldn't.
Like
You were, and for a long time, it was considered or judicially interpreted as self-defense in Canada was judicially interpreted as being against the law.
Yeah.
But it's one thing to say it's being judicially interpreted as against the law. It's another thing to deny you the means of self-defense under penalty of criminality.
Yeah.
It's just a much, much greater order of magnitude, much more serious issue.
Well, I think we'll call her there
right.
for part one, and we'll be back with part two when we go into third and fourth order effects.
Third and fourth order, and that's where we really put the meat on the bone.
and maybe discuss
Or
the
get crazy.
legalization of mushrooms so that maybe Patty doesn't hate the CBC and the unions so much.
You would probably need to medicate me into a torpor to get me to make peace with them. You probably would need that.
Right.
Gentlemen,
Thank
as ever, an absolute pleasure.
All right.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everyone.